I'm going to talk about the transatlantic slave trade, and to do it, I'm going to take you to places that you've never thought of, to reveal truths that you never think of, and make connections that you've never imagined. And it starts with a train journey. If you're interested in the people, places and events in Scottish history, then click the subscribe button at the bottom right of the screen and ring the notification bell to be told when I upload new videos. In the meantime, let me tell you a story. A while back, I made a video about coal slavery in Scotland. It was one of my most popular, and it tells an important story of how Scots were bound into service by other Scots. At the start of that video, I specifically asked people to forget about their ideas of transatlantic slavery. But in spite of that, there were a lot of comments from folks saying, what about Africans who sold other Africans? What about Arab slavers or North African Barbary pirates who enslaved white folks? What about British abolitionists? And what about? Well, what about watching the video before shouting your agenda? Now, I can't know for sure, but I got the feeling that the comments were coming from white nationalist types, and predominantly from across the Atlantic. Don't worry, we've got nutters too. People so obsessed by the racial element that they ignored both my appeal at the start and the fact that the video wasn't even about transatlantic slavery. Now, here's the thing. Robert Mugabe did some brutal and horrific things in Zimbabwe. I don't feel responsible for them because I'm half black. I don't feel guilty about the transatlantic slave trade because I'm half white. Neither am I an apologist for either. You're not responsible for what happened in the past, unless you try to justify it in the present. The fact is that many of us here in Scotland continue to benefit from transatlantic slavery today. It's why I took the train, but more of that later. It's where I'm taking the train to that's the heart of today's story. Now, you knew that I wasn't taking the train to the West Indies or the American Deep South. You might think with me talking about Scotland and transatlantic slavery that I'd be going to Glasgow to talk about sugar barons and tobacco lords, but no. I've brought you to Aberdeen. I'm going to Aberdeen University Museum's exhibition about their connection to transatlantic slavery. On the way, let me point out signs of this trade hidden in plain sight. Virginia Street, Jamaica Street, and Sugar House Lane. But there's way more than that. Aberdeen and its universities had deeper connections to the transatlantic triangular trade than you might imagine. It doesn't sound as bad when you call it the triangular trade, does it? European merchants would sail to West Africa with manufactured goods to trade. One type of manufactured goods would be rifles, which would give favoured locals the advantage in battle over their enemies. Those captured in battle would be a fair trade, and along with others captured or traded, shipped on to the second leg in enslavement in the West Indies or Americas, toiling in the fields to produce the goods for that most valuable third leg, sugar or maybe tobacco, the price of a human life. Europeans in West Africa traded amongst each other, and these copper manillas were a common foreign currency amongst British and Dutch, and no doubt West African traders. And of course, here is where you see the result. Here we have a letter written in 1798. It's from an estate manager in Jamaica writing back to the plantation owners, the Gordons of Aberdeenshire, whose wealth from forced African labour saw them build the very grand Cairness house near Fraserburgh over the 10 years that followed. The manager tells of new people enslaved for the benefit of the Gordons' forced labour camp. Igbo women from what we would call Nigeria were trafficked to the Jamaica estate. And he says in the letter down here, I've put a few new Negroes upon Georgia out of an Igbo cargo I lately sold myself. They consist of 4 women at £63, 1 woman, girl, £61, 4 little girls, £59. Over 100,000 Igbo people were forcibly enslaved, and we've not heard the last of them in this video. Now, Scotland's not a homogeneous nation. It isn't today, and it wasn't then. And here's something that illustrates it perfectly. Here's a book published just before the 1789 parliamentary debate on the abolition of slavery. It was written by this chap here, Oluda Equiano, an Igbo enslaved as a child in West Africa, trafficked across the Atlantic to the Caribbean, then Virginia, then England. Now, the title of his autobiography, The Interesting Narrative of the Life of Oluda Equiano, understates the incredible life that this guy led before becoming an abolitionist campaigner. If he'd been Scottish, I would have made a whole video about him. It goes without saying, there were people here in Aberdeen who supported him and his cause. And this book was a bestseller, as well as being one of the first books published by a black African in Europe. So the idea that our nation, or any nation for that matter, were all slavers or all abolitionists is ridiculous. Cries of mea culpa or sanctimonious hand washing are both misplaced. Aberdeen University is an amalgamation of Marischal College and King's College. Marischal College sent 2 pro-abolition petitions to Parliament, whilst King's College refused to do so. But students of both, and lecturers, administrators, technicians, cleaners and marketing departments, as well as everyday Scots like you and me today, still benefit from that trade. Let me introduce you to Gilbert Ramsey. Don't worry, until recently, I'd never heard of him either. This painting came to Aberdeen University in 1728, the year that this chap died. He was born in 1658 in the parish of Burse, about 30 miles west of Aberdeen. After he graduated from Marischal College, he spent the next 12 years in England, attending Balliol College, Oxford, and becoming an Episcopalian minister. When he died in 1728, he left a legacy that was one of the biggest donations ever to have been made to the Aberdeen Universities up to that point. How did he do that? He'd arrived in the Caribbean as a minister in 1689. In the next 42 years, he spent 3 years in a parish in Antigua and then 32 years as rector of Christ Church, Barbados. He twice married wealthy women from the Barbadian slavocracy, gaining rich estates in the process. It seems that he also had family connections to the Royal African Company that had a monopoly on the importation of enslaved people to Barbados. Add to that his role overseeing estates on behalf of the Society for the Propagation of the Gospel in Foreign Parts. In case you didn't catch that, a missionary society funded the propagation of the gospel with profits from slave labour camps. When it came to slavery, Gilbert was up to his dog collar in it. And when he died, is well instructed that his executors should sell off the enslaved people that he owned in Barbados and add the money to his estate in order to pay various legacies. The £3,800 paid to the university would fund a professor of languages, a chair of Hebrew and Oriental languages, 4 bursars of divinity. I mean, he was a religious man after all, wasn't he? And it added some bursaries in philosophy to the philosophy bursaries that he'd already funded earlier. But we'll come back to that. Oh, and they got the picture as well. I mean, you've got to preserve the memory of such a significant benefactor. But he made other donations as well, you know. This is known as the Vinegar Bible. So called because there are quite a few spelling mistakes in this particular print. One of which, instead of telling the parable of the vineyard, describes the parable of the vinegar. Now, it's really, really rare, and we're so lucky to get to have a look at this today, and here's why. Embossed on the front are the words, "The gift of the Reverend Gilbert Ramsey of Barbados to the Parish Church of Birse in Scotland." I guess we better go to Birse. This is Fingen in the parish of Birse. When I introduced the idea of transatlantic slavery, you probably didn't expect to be coming to a location in rural Aberdeenshire. But this is where Gilbert Ramsey was born, and it benefited from his legacies. Gilbert left a sum of £500, the interest from which should be used for the benefit of the poor of this parish. I often hear the folks described at the very start of this video saying, most people who fought for the Confederate Army never owned slaves. Fair point. Of course, none of the poor who benefited from this fund owned slaves either. 14 shillings for an honest man in distress. £1 for a blind man in Gallow Hill. 14 shillings to a poor boy. £3 to James Ford's 5 motherless children, 6 shillings and a pair of shoes for 10 children of poor parents, 15 shillings for widows old and infirm, £1 10 shillings to Margaret Lowe's funeral. A second £500 was to yield interest that would pay for a school. It meant that children from this area could go to school for free. Ramsey's will stipulated that his slave money should only pay for a teacher who was pious, prudent and experienced to instruct the pupils in the principles of religion. They had to be able to read and write English and to understand both Greek and Latin. It provided a good start in life for children in this area. I'm sure that in their minds the donation came from Gilbert Ramsey. But in truth, it came from the backs of the enslaved of the Caribbean. Today's school was built in 1962, and the original school and teacher's house passed to the Birse Community Trust, ensuring that to this day it continues to benefit the people of the parish. I wonder how often the people of this community think about how much West Africans donated to the life of this rural Aberdeenshire parish. We know a little bit of the story of one of the children of the parish who benefited from the school's education. To tell you about him, I want to take you back into town and introduce you to some folks that are really special to me. Whilst I'm doing that, let me mention that I'll be doing my Stories of Scotland stand-up comedy show throughout the North East in October and November 2023. Come and see me in Portsoy, Torfins, West Hill, Keith, Braemar, Ellen, Lossiemouth, Ballater, Cruden Bay, Mintlaw and Aberdeen itself. For details of all tour dates and tickets, click top right or find the link in the description below. I met my sister Comfort from my dad's second marriage when he went back to Ghana, along with her Nigerian husband Ben. All right. Hey, hiya.
Good to see you.
Hey, what the hell happened to you, Ben?
I had a freak accident, hurt my back.
A freak accident?
Yeah.
It's your age, mate. Do you know what I mean? It's your age.
I guess so. I guess so.
Listen, what do you think of this place?
It's totally beautiful. I've been here before.
You've never been here before?
No.
Yeah, you see, your big brother will show you places in Aberdeen.
All right.
Yeah, come on, let's go and see. Now, here's the thing: you've never been in here before, but you do have a connection to Aberdeen University, don't you?
Yes, I do.
Tell me about it.
Okay, well, as part of my work in NHS Grampian in occupational health, I have an honorary associate position in University of Aberdeen. Just for...
So you give lectures to Aberdeen University students?
Yes, when I'm asked, yes, I do that.
Right, okay. Now, Ben, you have a connection to the Aberdeen University sector as well, don't you?
Yes, I do.
What do you do?
I recruit international students for Robert Gordon from South Asia.
So you lure students from South Asia
Kinda.
to come to universities in Aberdeen,
Yeah.
and you teach people in Aberdeen University.
Yes.
There you go, right?
That's the short answer.
Yeah, there you go, right? So you guys have both got a connection to this place.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's something I want to show. As West Africans, right, connected to the Aberdeen University sector, I want to show you this window. Come around here.
Okay.
Now, these are the great and the good of people that have been involved in the history of Marshall College, right? Now come over here, let me show you this. I didn't just bring you to see this beautiful hall, I brought you to see this particular crest here, right? Now this is a crest, as you can see there, of Gilbert Ramsey. 1727, because he died in 1727. And he was an Episcopalian minister, and he was a huge benefactor to the university here at Marshall College.
Okay.
And that's why 180 years after his death, when this was put up, they included his crest in this beautiful window. Okay. Now the reason was that he gave a gift of £3,800. Now that's like over £1 million
in today's money.
Yeah, it was one of the biggest gifts that had been given to the university at the time by a single person, right?
Okay, wow.
And that's a lot of money for a minister.
Yeah.
Or
What did you do?
maybe in Nigeria.
How much was he earning as a minister?
As a minister.
Yeah.
Well, the thing is, he wasn't just a minister, he was a minister in the Caribbean.
Okay.
So in actual fact, he had plantations, and the money that he made and gifted to the university where you work, right, was made from enslaved people that were taken from West Africa over to the Caribbean, and when he died, his will had them sold so that he could give money to the university here.
Interesting.
Ben, you're Nigerian.
Yeah.
What tribe are you?
Igbo.
Igbo.
Yeah.
No, I knew that. I knew that in the joke back, right? What I didn't know until I started this investigation is that over 100,000 Igbo people were transported across the Atlantic as part of that transatlantic slave trade. Do you know what I mean? And there was earlier on when I was in the museum, we saw a letter written by a manager of a plantation in Jamaica sending back to the Gordons here that he'd just put 9 enslaved Igbo women on the plantation there. There's also a book written by an Igbo man who was enslaved, taken to the West Indies, then the Americas, and then brought here. And he was the slave of a ship's captain who fought against the French, in all the battles between the French and the British. And he had to accompany that guy on the boat because he was so when they were involved in battles and stuff, this poor guy, not only was he enslaved, but he was also in and fought at the Battle of Lagos against. So he must have gone all the way. I can see my house from here, right? Yeah, and sad. Of course it's sad. That's not the only thing that he did, because he gave. He funded a chair, a couple of different chairs, but he also gave bursaries in philosophy. Okay. He also, with some of his money, one of the places we were earlier on was out in Burs, in Fingen, and he built a school there. And he gave bursaries in philosophy here, but only to people called Ramsey. And many years after Gilbert Ramsey's death, there was a guy called Frank Ramsey, who, number one, came from Fingen and Burs and went through that school that he benefited from this guy's donations. And then he came here and got one of the Ramsey bursaries, right? And when he graduated, what did he do? He went across to the West Indies, got a farm, and enslaved more people, and the cycle
continued.
Yeah. In fact, when the colonial slavery in Britain was abolished, Frank Ramsey, the second guy, was compensated for the loss of his 46 slaves that he no longer had as assets, and cash was paid out to all the slave owners who no longer had the benefit of their slaves.
Yeah, it's sad, isn't it?
It's sad, but there's more I want to tell you about compensation paid out to people enslaved, paid out to slave owners, right, in Aberdeen, in connection with Aberdeen University. Yes. So, come with me.
Yeah, it's interesting. You wouldn't think that, Aberdeen or Scotland in general was that connected to slavery and...
Ramsey wasn't the only connection between Aberdeen University and slavery. History is replete with stories of Scots who went to, worked in, or stayed at home and profited from Caribbean slavery. And I wanted to show Comfort and Ben the most obvious sign of it in Aberdeen. For this, we're heading down for the other component part of Aberdeen University, King's College. There are some beautiful old buildings here dating back to the 15th century, but some parts of the college are more recent and maybe slightly less attractive. What do you think of this?
It's beautiful, it's grand.
I'm interested about the crescent moon though.
Yeah. We were talking about that.
I'll be honest, I think it looks hideous.
Really?
But that's...
Big entrance.
But you see it quite often, don't you?
Yeah. Yes, I do.
Why is that?
Well, because I bring my son to the nursery.
Your nursery's here?
Yes.
Because your Aberdeen University staff use this particular nursery, so you pass these gates every day.
That's right.
But I bet you don't know about the history of the gates.
No.
All right, let me tell you a bit about the history of the gates, okay? In the 18th century, all right, there was a guy and his name was Hugh Leslie. Now his dad had been the professor of Greek here at Aberdeen University. Well, the King's College and Marshall College came together to form Aberdeen University. So we've been to Marshall College, King's College. His dad was a professor of Greek. And he, Hugh Leslie, married a woman called Anne Lamont, who'd been born in Jamaica. And so, of course, she'd inherited plantations in Jamaica. And one of their younger sons, because they had somebody managing it over there, they were just enjoying the benefits of it, right?
Okay.
But they had some problems with the manager, so they sent one of their younger sons, Hugh Fraser Leslie, to manage the estate. Now, he did very well. And not only did he run his mum's estate, but he managed to buy 2 plantations of his own. Yeah. So he
business was good.
Business was good, yes, indeed, right? Now, when slavery was abolished in the colonies and compensation was paid out, as I mentioned to you, they controlled I think it was 492, and 492 enslaved people, for which they got compensation of £7,112, 18 shillings and 11 pence, right? Which is a lot of money in these days. What did they do with the money? Well, these gates are not the entrance to the university.
Okay.
These gates were actually the entrance to their estate house on the other side. Okay?
Oh, wow.
And when they got that compensation, some of the money went into upgrading the house, and some of it was used to build these gates. Right? Yes. So they were built with compensation
From
slavery. Yeah. And in actual fact, not only that, when the government paid out compensation in 1834, okay, where did the government get the money? They issued British government debt, all right, to fund the payouts, right? And do you know when they finished paying off that debt?
When?
2015.
What?
8 years ago, they'd been paying out compensation for on the debt for that until 8 years ago. All right?
Taxpayers' money.
You and I, as taxpayers, were paying for the money that was compensated to slavers all those years ago. It's an incredible thought, isn't it? Do you know what I mean? Yeah. Now, here's another thought. Right, we're all West African, right? And I'm guessing we've all been to Elmina Castle at Cape Coast. You've been to Elmina Castle at Cape Coast? And you know when you go in the castle and there's that gate of no return. Yeah? Where when slaves were taken and put out in the boat and taken, right? You know that feeling you get when you go down and it's a kind of creepy, eerie. Do you know what I mean? You just, You know what strikes me? Is the people that went through that gate of no return, the people who funded this gate here that you pass every day as part of Aberdeen University to your Aberdeen University nursery where your son and my nephew right goes to nursery every day, right? That's quite an incredible
history.
Yeah, it's an incredible history and an incredible thought, isn't it?
Yeah.
One more thing, right? See this guy, Hugh Fraser Leslie, that when he came back from the West Indies, okay, he was asked to be on the committee that organised the amalgamation of Marshall College and King's College to go together to become the new Aberdeen University. So Aberdeen University is not only benefiting from the proceeds of slavery, people in the integral formation of it.
Goes down to the foundation of it.
Goes down to the foundation of it. Yeah.
Unbelievable. It's true.
But the beneficiaries are wider than that. You see, the Fraser's Mansion House that these gates were originally built to serve is also now a community centre. It's impossible to disentangle the wealth created in Western economies from a trade that delivered economic rewards to those countries over hundreds of years. The Fraser's slavery compensation went into the fabric of their buildings. But what about all the other slave owners throughout Scotland? What did they do with their capital payout? Well, they invested it. Many invested it in the new technology of the day. Railways that were being built by private enterprise. Tunnels, bridges and Victorian infrastructure projects. The very infrastructure that I use to get here today. We here in Scotland benefit from the transatlantic slave trade every day in ways we never appreciate. Here's the thing. Ben, back in Nigeria, Your parents are pretty well off, aren't they?
Maybe.
Well,
You see?
Come on. Come on.
They're okay.
They're okay. They've got a few quid. Let's not mess about.
Yeah.
Right? Okay. All I'm saying is, right, that all this slave money that's trickled down on this side of the Atlantic, right, in West Africa, there were local people that sold other people into slavery as well.
Yeah.
Maybe some of that money trickled down on your side of the Atlantic as well. I'm just saying the whole thing's much messier
Than we thought. Yeah.
than we tend to think about.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm going to leave you.
Okay.
All right.
I'll see you later.
See you.
Good to see you again.
All right, cheers.
And cheers.
care.
Bye.
At the start of this episode, I told you that this story would take us to places that you'd never thought of, reveal truths that you'd never think of, and connections that you never imagined. I hope I've delivered on that claim. The transatlantic slave trade pervades every corner and every person in Scotland, right down to the modern day. Beneficiaries were and are, of course, predominantly European, but not exclusively. The tangled web's messier than we'd like to think. A Scottish West African, I reaped the rewards of slavery just getting here today. Now, I wasn't responsible for the enslavement or forced labour of past generations. We're only responsible for how our knowledge informs our actions today. Don't blame me. But people on one side of the world were enslaved and forced to work so that people on another continent could benefit from the raw materials extracted. Middlemen grew rich and cast charitable crumbs of hypocrisy. Even the pious and the academic turned a blind eye because they rationalised their own need. And the public thought nothing but to have the new goods that they enjoyed. And if you don't think that applies to us today, text me. Now, the video that sparked this one's coming up on screen. I can only make these videos because people support by clicking top right to become Patreon members. You could do that. But maybe a modern slavery charity deserves the funds more. Hamid Dawkins can be Lama Life. Sherry and Rasta.